In Chapter 11, you will read about the Japanese immigration and the natives' reactions, the Picture Pride invasion, the Japanese family and community in America. You will also read about the occupations and the alien land laws, their exclusion, war, evacuations, and their relocation for their protection, as well as life in the camps. The chapter wraps up with Japanese American assimilation, both secondary and primary structural, as well as educational and socioeconomic success, and the model minority stereotype that's associated with the Japanese. The immigration of Japanese to America was small. Nevertheless, there was a fear that the United States would be overrun by a multitude of Mongolian and that the country should be on guard against the Yellow Peril. They have faced ruthless racism, and despite that racism, they are regularly singled out as proof that they can succeed. In 1890, there were a little over 2,000 Japanese in the entire United States, but in 1891, about 1,500 Japanese arrived in this country. In 1905, the war in which Japan was victorious over Russia was the first time a non-white nation had overcome. A non-white nation had defeated a white nation. As usual, there was hostility, and before it was directed at the Chinese, now it was pointed towards the Japanese. The first anti-Japanese protest was organized in 1900 after labor unions gained control of the San Francisco government. The Asiatic Exclusion League was formed, and the San Francisco Chronicle published articles condemning Japanese immigration. Soon there followed an increase of racial violence against the Japanese. These incidents were followed by a call for segregation in the schools, and about a year and a half later, the Board of Education ordered all Japanese, Chinese, and Koreans to attend separate schools for Orientals. Let's take a closer look at the school board crises. After the segregation went into effect, the Japanese government filed a formal complaint with President Roosevelt. He in turn declared his concern and consented to the use of armed forces if necessary to protect the Japanese. During 1907 and 1908, there was a series of steps. The school board rescinded the segregation resolution. The president issued an executive order to limit the entry of Japanese workers into the United States through Mexico, Canada, or Hawaii. Part 2 of the compromise is the famous Gentleman's Agreement. The government of Japan kept a tight rein on passports to America. There was a sharp reduction in the number of Japanese coming into the United States and Hawaii. America was successful in limiting the immigration without insulting Japan. Japan soon found a way around this issue. There were many Japanese men who were single in America. Consequently, these male sojourners became part of the Picture Bride invasion. Photographs were exchanged, and bride and grooms were married by legal proxy. The bride would then come to America to join her husband. Many Japanese families were established in this manner. Consequently, the natives were angry and felt that they circumvented the Gentleman's Agreement. By the 1920s, the Japanese had formed several small communities that were similar to the homeland. There was a difference between the first and second generations because of the restrictions. The Issei arrived before the lawful exclusion in 1924. The Nisei, meaning second generation, were American-born citizens who generally reached adulthood when World War II broke out. The Sansei were born pretty much after World War II. The Yonsei, or the fourth generation, are the children of the Sansei. The Japanese in America developed cohesive communities. They were polite, respectful. In the family, there was a duty to the community and great attention to the wishes of the parents. The Issei placed great value in education, hard work, and the successes of their livelihood. These traits were fostered because of the extended family in the community. These were relatives from the same provinces of Japan known as the Kenjin. Pretty much these were the people they hung out with. They were the preferred friends, neighbors, associates, and marriage partners as well. These bonds are known as Kenjinkai. The Japanese Association helped establish and maintain traditional Japanese customs in America. When the Japanese began to arrive in the United States, many took jobs in constructing the railroads, canning, mining, fishing, and seasonal farm labor. By 1908, farming became the chief form of employment for them. Fears that the Japanese would buy up all of California led to the passage of the Alien Land Law of 1913. If you were not eligible for citizenship, you could not own land in California. Takao Ozawa challenged the denial of citizenship, and in 1922, the Supreme Court ruled that he was not white, and therefore he was not eligible for citizenship. The Japanese got around that ruling by registering the land they purchased in their children's name, continued to farm the land, and the products were turned profitable. Those that were agitated by the Japanese went to the national level to exclude the Japanese from being allowed to immigrate to the United States. The Immigration Quota Act of 1924 was passed, and the gentleman's agreement was rejected. Consequently, the Issei remained stuck. Their families were citizens, however, they could not fully partake in American society. The Japanese were very angry. They felt that the United States had gone against their own standards of equity and justice as well as the gentleman's agreement. As mentioned, the Issei were left in a strange position. The Issei strongly supported the Nisei attendance in public schools and implored them to study hard and bring honor to the family name. Many Nisei were teased about their features and were called names such as Japs while in school. As the Nisei reached adulthood, many felt that the organizations established by their elders did not meet their needs, and eventually in 1930, they had established the Japanese American Citizens League to represent the Nisei's determination to rise in America and be accepted as equals. One of their goals was to acquire citizenship for the Issei. By 1941, the Japanese community was growing. The Issei were very successful economically. The Nisei had culturally assimilated mainly by substitution. Some members of the Sansei came on the scene. However, after December the 7th, 1941, things changed drastically. The attack on Pearl Harbor led to the declaration of war against Japan. Eventually, in 1942, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 90066, authorizing the military to restrict the movement of all persons within those areas. All people of Japanese ancestry, regardless if they were citizens or not, were required to leave the prohibited areas. They were arrested and imprisoned in relocation centers. Fresno had one of those relocation centers. It's located at the Fresno Fairgrounds. There were no trials. They were just detained just because you were of Japanese ancestry. From the relocation centers, they were taken to camps. These camps were located in California, Arizona, Arkansas, Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado. The camps were not finished when the first evacuees arrived. Life was harsh, very little furniture, extreme temperatures, no privacy, and the Japanese were not used to the food that they were fed. Many lost weight and felt humiliated. To make matters worse, the guns that were supposed to be pointed outwards to protect them were not. They were turned inwards toward them. They felt betrayed. With tensions creating problems with the internees, a decision was made to resettle all loyal evacuees as soon as possible. they were given a questionnaire concerning their background and loyalty to the United States. There was a controversy over those questions, especially question number 28. Many internees were unsure how to answer. A simple yes or no could be misinterpreted. There were several legal issues that were raised by the evacuations and the relocation program. The Supreme Court ruled in 3 cases. The first one was Hirabayashi versus the United States. Hirabayashi appealed the curfew that was imposed only to those of Japanese ancestry. The court stated, distinctions between citizens solely because of their ancestry are by their very nature odious to the free people, but ruled, nevertheless, that because the danger was so great, the curfew ordered had been appropriate. The second case, Korematsu versus the United States, concerned primarily the constitutionality of the evacuations of the Japanese Americans from the West Coast. In this case, the decision was not unanimous. The third case was Ex parte Endo. Mitsuyi Endo challenged the right of the government to imprison loyal Japanese Americans. This time, the justices agreed with Mitsuyi Endo. The extent of the losses suffered by the Japanese can bear no monetary value. However, we do know that the losses were massive. In 1988, the Japanese American Citizens League pressed Congress to pass a bill, and the surviving detainees received $20,000 and a formal apology by President Bush. In 1983 and 1986, the 2 earlier cases were settled. Both Hirabayashi and Korematsu received a form of restitution. The courts agreed that the government's claim that people of Japanese ancestry had been a threat to national security was false. Take a look at the triangle. The first generation Issei limited their contacts with people outside of their group. The contact was mainly for financial purposes. The Issei also maintained their cultural heritage and passed it on to the Nisei. The Nisei moved towards cultural assimilation. They were influenced by the English-speaking friends that they had in schools. These friends were like them, born in the United States. As for the Sansei, the third generation, studies have found evidence that there is a revival of cultural nationalism among the Sansei. It seemed that they were actively attempting to revive their ancient heritage or to construct a specifically Japanese American identity. We know that Japanese Americans are highly assimilated. Take a look at the educational occupations and incomes. Japanese Americans exceed whites and other Asian groups in education. Among Japanese Americans, men and women, they surpass white men and women in professional careers. The men are in occupations as professional, technical, and kindred workers. As for Japanese American income, the average income for them is higher. People who marry out of their own ethnic group play a part in the blurring of ethnic boundaries. They increase the mixture of their respective ethnic groups and increase the range of ethnicities that their children may assume. Excuse me. They are also important because it is also an indicator of the extent of assimilation. Interracial marriages in the United States have been low. Hawaii is the exception. As outmarriages become more common, each succeeding generation will have an increase. Studies have shown that the Sansei are likely to marry outside of the group as they are within it as well. There seems to be a restoration of pride and interest in their ethnic heritage by the Sansei. Success. Just how were the Japanese in American society able to overcome the stigma of a non-white identity? Not only did they overcome, but they did it in a relatively short amount of time against a lot of discrimination. Pretty much, they succeeded because of their hard work, education, occupational success, politeness, respect for authority, and perseverance. These traits were transmitted to succeeding generations and the entire Japanese community. They were enforced by the entire community, and conformity was expected. The author stated that the role of culture should not be ignored as we make an effort to understand the Japanese experience in America. They also suggest that disadvantages based on racial characteristics are not necessarily permanent in America, that they can't be overcome by other groups. The Japanese Americans have been singled out as proof that racially distinctive groups can succeed in America. They are considered the model minority. This is a non-white group that has overcome all obstacles through hard work and determination. There are a few that disapprove of this stereotype because it is used to line up one group against another, and this slows down efforts to unite on issues when it may be in their best interest to work together. Another criticism is that while one Asian group's successes may be celebrated, there may be another group that is struggling or has encountered a personal hardship and they get ignored. Another criticism of the model minority is that it diverts attention from the fact that Japanese and other Asian American groups are still victims of different forms of discrimination. Overall, as a group, they have reached high levels of educational, occupational, and civic attainment while facing high levels of discrimination, and the reality of these achievements has provided the foundation for this stereotype. Once again, at the end of the chapter is a question. How have the Japanese Americans achieved a high level of worldly success in the face of high levels of discrimination?